I've been talking about free will this week. So if I ask you guys, what is free will? Anyone want to volunteer? Any thoughts? Any comments? It's okay if you don't. What is free will? Oh, that's okay. What is free will? And do we have free will?
Well, our ego likes to think we do.
Okay, go with that.
I think humans are made to have some free will.
Mm-hmm. They are. It's very hard to access, but you're right. We are made to have free will. Vimalananda, and I love this, he says, yes, we all do have free will, but having free will is like walking on one leg. So we have it, but it's very hard to access it. And part of the reason why it's hard to access it is because we don't really understand what it is to have free will. So what you said about the ego, yeah, the ego is spot on, thinking that free will is, do I pick a chocolate cake or a peanut butter cake kind of thing. So I have that choice. That's what the ego thinks. In actuality, it is not free will because it's based on our samskaras. So I'm going to take this off. This is the unveiling.
Ta-da! Artistically. Yeah.
The horses have returned. I started drawing these when I was in like kindergarten.
Yeah, so you have to be better at something.
These horses are spectacular. What do you, I mean, so free will versus ego will. Free will, so think of them acting in a manner. So if we talk about what is free will, we can think of free will as expansion, right? We live one of two ways in this world. We either live in being very expansive or we contract. Contraction would be ego will. Free will, think of it as dharma. Ego will would be adharma. So dharma is our duty. It is righteous actions. Adharma is against that. It is going back to that state of contraction. If you think of free will, it is learning how to be selfless as opposed to selfishness. That is based on ego will. You have, so when the biggest thing is, so Swamiji always says, you need to act skillfully, right? Above all, yoga is skillfulness in action. But if I don't know how to act skillfully, I'm going to be controlled and dominated by my samskaras. And those samskaras are our habit patterns that keep us in this cycle of samsara. The cycle of you die, you're born, you die, you're born, you die, you're born. It's not freeing ourselves from the will of samskara. When we actually begin to think and look at things based on free will, right? That means we're doing a practice. That means we have a greater understanding of ourselves. That means we're acting in a more expansive way. I had this little talk with myself this morning. I was cleaning up and there was some leftover hummus in the refrigerator that I needed to get rid of. And I thought, because the boys now know the word chores. So chores is when we take the recycling out or whatever it is, and they go with us to do chores. So I had this and I thought, I'm going to take this trash out. I can just throw this in the trash and not do anything with it. And I thought, no, I can't. Because that's not acting skillfully. Reduce, reuse, recycle. We are here, and part of why we're here on Earth, part of our responsibility is to protect Earth. So I scraped all the leftover out, put it in the composter, and then washed it so that someone else, perhaps this evening or another time, can take it. Right? Now you reuse it. If you don't reuse it, that's on you. But I'm reusing it. So you can take it. So that is part of that. Expansion is doing the right thing. Right? It would have been very easy at that moment in my head, I thought to just be lazy and put it in the trash and not worry about it. But that wasn't the right thing to do. So acting skillful means that we're constantly thinking about what it is we're doing. Is this a skillful action? Because if there's a peanut butter pie and a chocolate pie, I'm going to have the habit pattern somewhere inside of me. I will be drawn to the chocolate pie. I'm going to go for chocolate pie. My habit patterns are going to push me to the chocolate pie. Riley's habits would probably push him to the peanut butter pie because he enjoys peanut butter a lot more than I enjoy peanut butter. So we have to really start looking at and examining ourselves. So when we think of the ego and we think of expansion, so they talk about this, I'm sure we've talked about it, but the chariot, and they talk about it in the Katha Upanishad, which is about Nachiketa when he goes to visit Lord Yama, but also in the Bhagavad Gita. So you have the chariot, and the chariot is us. The chariot is the body. Then you have this little passenger inside, and that's the Atman, right? The Atman resides in the body. Then you have the chariot driver, and that's our buddhi. Then you have the reins that are controlling the horses, so to speak, but not really. That's the mind. And the horses represent the senses. Now there should be, typically you'll see 10 horses because you've got your input and output senses. So you have our sensory senses, which are the eyes, ears, nose, right? The 5 senses we learned about in school. Then you have your action. So input, output. If I'm constantly inputting negativity, right, my output is going to be negative actions. So you have, if you think about input, output, this is the senses, but then they're traveling on the road of desire. And this is where we get into trouble because our horses are going down our road of desire, right? So you've got these 10 horses that are looking every which way. They're seeing this turn off here and it's like, oh my gosh, look at that. That's great. All these shiny lights and all these pretty things. And there's a shiny new nickel and oh, there's this. And oh, there's some really attractive people over there. And oh, here's a trip. And oh, here's that. So our horses are constantly going everywhere. Our senses are led by our desires. So what you desire, right, your senses are going to gravitate to. This is our road of desire that the horses are traveling on. Then you have, how possibly can we have any control of the reins? The mind doesn't have control. The mind is going choo, choo, choo all over the place. And the poor chariot driver.
What is buddhi?
Your higher intellect.
Thank you.
It's your ability to discern. So the buddhi is just like, whoa, just barely hanging on because everything is spinning out of control. And whatever we feed in there, right, we need to clear the space because we can fill our buddhi with a bunch of junk. And then how can the buddhi make any higher based decisions that aren't based on our samskaras, that aren't based on our habits? Because if I'm constantly inundating myself feeding sense gratification, if I'm constantly doing that, my buddhi is not going to have any say at all. My buddhi is just going to be hanging on for dear life. So I'm just going to be spinning out of control. And then the Atman is just there for the ride at this point. If I can't even listen to the buddhi, right, the Atman has nothing, has a lot to say, but I'm not going to listen to the Atman because the Atman's way back here. So this is where, so when we think about this, we have to start examining our habits, our behaviors, our thoughts. We need to start looking at what it is we desire and how that dictates our lives. And all these desires come from our 4 primitive fountains: food, sleep, sex, and self-preservation. If you start examining your desires, and you can even break it down a little bit more, it comes all down to some feeling of lack in ourselves. We don't feel whole, we don't feel complete, because we have forgotten that we are a child of God. We have forgotten that we're a spark of divinity. So now, if we think of the 4 primitive fountains, right? If we think, okay, how do I eat? So we'll go with sweets because everyone here knows I have a sweet tooth. So say that I've made an apple pie and it's delicious. It's really a delicious apple pie, just an incredible apple pie. So I'm thinking about this apple pie and I've had a slice every night. I have enough restraint that I'm not going to eat the whole apple pie, but I'm having a nice slice every night and I'm enjoying it. And I hear a knock at the door and it's getting time. I've cleaned out my dinner dishes and I'm sitting down and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, next thing out is the apple pie and it's going to be just wonderful. And it's the last piece of apple pie. And I hear this knock at the door and I'm like, who's at the door? So I open up the door and it's Swamiji. And I'm like, oh, welcome, come on in. And I sit down and I'm looking at him and I'm thinking about my apple pie, right? And I'm thinking, I should probably give it to him. But it's my last piece. Do I want to give my last piece away? I really want that last piece of apple pie. And I think, well, you know what? I have, for those moments that I really don't have time to bake a sweet, I have some Trader Joe biscuits in there. I'm going to give him some Trader Joe biscuits. That'll be just fine. And then I'm going to offer him a cup of yogi tea because I've got plenty of yogi tea in there. He can have his choice of yogi tea. And plus, that's Riley's preference anyway. So I can give away the yogi tea. So now I'm sitting there and, we can all say, oh no, if it was Swamiji, I would give it to him. This is where we need to be really honest and not delude ourselves. How many times has someone near and dear to you wanted something and it's been the last of something and you've not given it to them? Or you've given it to them, but it's been very begrudgingly. And then you were angry that you gave it to them because they didn't appreciate it enough. They didn't thank you enough. They didn't give you as many accolades as you thought you deserved for giving them whatever it was that you perceived was so special. So if we examine, right, that in relationship to all these other things, so my food, so how do I eat? What do I eat? Like the whole thing, do I share? Am I greedy with it? If we think about that, even going down to the self-preservation, right? Do I have to get the first bite of food? Do I have to get the biggest piece of food? Do I have to get the piece that looks the best? Right? If we start examining that generosity or lack of generosity with the food, then we can see, oh, I really act very much out of my ego when it comes to food. There's no free will there. There's no expansion. I'm not generous. I'm not kind with my food. I want it for myself, right? I need to preserve myself at the expense of someone else. There's absolutely no selflessness there whatsoever. Do I have to be the first in line? Whatever it is, we need to examine ourselves in relationship to our desires around food. Riley said, Doyle, who he spent some time with, said, you can tell a lot by the way a person eats their food and by the way they gather their food. And it's true. You can tell a lot. So, not saying that you start looking at how everybody's eating their food. Look at how you get your food, how you share or don't share your food, right? Because we have a relationship with food. So figure out your relationship with food. It doesn't matter what anyone else's relationship is, but you need to figure out your relationship with food. And then if we think about sleep, this is, how do you sleep, right? Do you know that if I sleep early, I'm going to be able to get up and I'm going to do my practice and the day is going to be much better? Or I'm just going to get up and I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to get up on time so that I'm not rushing and trying to fly out the door at the last minute. And I'm not driving down the street to work and I'm angry because this idiot in front of me is going the speed limit. Why are you going 25 and a 25? Right? I need to get someplace because I didn't prepare. Because I decided to stay up late and I decided to surf the internet and I decided to stalk old people, friends, whatever, foes on Facebook. It's my fault. But yet I'm blaming this person because I didn't have the right relationship with food, or with sleep. My sleep was very ego. It was more important to me to surf and look at TikTok, and more important to me to see what somebody else was doing. I wanted to look at their photos where they were out of town. Now I'm angry when I go to sleep. I'm tired when I wake up because I stayed up late. And then I'm angry when I'm going to work. It's a problem all the way around, right? Because we don't have the right relationship with our sleep. So we don't even have to think about it as far as doing a practice. Think about it in just your daily mundane life. Or when you sit there and you think sleep, and then you had, say, a very busy day, a really busy day, and life just threw some zingers at you. You know, you had to do an extra run to the store, or maybe someone in your family had an accident, you had to go to the hospital, whatever it is, right? You had all these zingers. So then the next morning you think, or that night when you go to sleep, you think, you know what? I don't really need to do my practice. I'm so tired. Family life today was really rough. It's going to be okay. I don't need to do my practice today. So we just go to sleep. So we enact that sloth and inertia instead of doing our practice, which is what we need to do. Or, like I said, if you're not doing a practice, think about how to be more proactive and less whiny and less a victim before you go to sleep. We all have a story, and we all have a story every day of our lives. But does that story dictate? Yeah, usually it does. It dictates the way we eat. It dictates the way we sleep. It dictates everything in our life because we let it. And the reason why we let it is because simply we're not doing a practice. Because everything, trust me, everything comes down to doing your practice, period. And I don't care if it's a 5-minute practice in the morning, a 5-minute practice in the evening of doing a breathing practice. You will see qualitative changes in your life. And this is where you have that shraddha, you have that faith in the practice. You see that something's working. You mean just sitting here this morning, 5 minutes today, made my day so much better? And then you develop that faith that you want, I want more of this. If 5 minutes is doing this, this is pretty spectacular, right? So then you see more of your free will and expansion. You see yourself start behaving and reacting very differently. So then we go to sex. So how do you do sex? And don't just think of sex as intercourse. Think of, we can incorporate relationships into this. How do you do relationships, right? Swamiji said, and I really wish I would have heard this in my younger years, don't have sex with someone that you don't love. It's very dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because it feeds the ego. It is such an ego stroker. You know, if you hear someone say to you, oh my gosh, this is the best sex I've ever had. Well, of course it is. It was with me, right? You know, we like that stroking. Or we're in a relationship simply because that person adores us. We have no connection, like we don't feel it from our side. We know that we're not in this permanently. I'm in this because you are simply stroking my ego. You want a very humbling practice? Go back and apologize to people that you've done wrong. Go back and apologize to a person you've been in a relationship with that you had no intentions, and acknowledge that you used and manipulated them. It's humbling, but it is freeing. It is so freeing to acknowledge how your ego played a part in that. I would highly recommend, if you've had any relationships that you were not totally honest with, you go spend some time and talk to that person and share how your ego manipulated and caused you to act certain ways. It's a real experience in growth. But think about, like I said, in this whole thing of relationships, how do you do your relationships? Do you do things in the relationships that are expansive? Are they contracting? Here's a sure sign of contracting, right? If you're doing something, whether it be for work, whether it be for a parent, whether it be for a sibling, whether it be for a friend, to get some sort of praise, you're not expanding, you're contracting. It's not about, you're not giving selflessly. That's a very selfish act. I'm giving you something, but you better praise me, or you better think I'm really special, or you better tell everyone about how wonderful I am. How is that selfless? It is not selfless at all. So start thinking about every interaction you have. Text messaging, right? They found that when we get that little ding from a text message, right, it releases a little shot of oxytocin to us. So now we send text messages in the hopes of getting a text message back that's, oh, I love you, because I want somebody to say I love you back to me. Or, oh, let's have dinner because, we want someone to send us a message. Let's get together because that makes me feel important. But typically, I wouldn't even want to spend time with that person, right? But this person thinks I'm the bee's knees. So look at this. I'm just pretty special here. So we have to start being really mindful of how we do our relationships. Love is selfless. Attachment is selfish. Right? When you give a gift, what's the purpose? What is the intention of that behind that gift? It's better not to give anything than to give something, wanting something in return. And I don't even care if it's a thank you. If you're wanting a thank you, you want something, and you've negated any type of selflessness, and you're not acting on free will, you're acting out of your ego. And it is only through free will that we can start to walk, right? That we're not standing there with one leg bound up. How do we get to that place of free will? Going back to doing our practice. And be consistent with the practice. Be dedicated to your practice. Be sincere with your practice. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes a day, twice a day. That's 10 minutes that you're not focusing on whatever it is you may be focusing on. I mean, it could be something that you think is benign. There for a while, especially in 2018 when things were crazy in my life, I just really enjoyed looking at baby goats. It was my thing. It was a distraction, right? I had gone through this experience of being locked down in the coal cellar. And, then there was this trial coming for the person that did all this stuff to me. So I would spend time just looking at baby goats because it was like, okay. And then you have to snap out of it because it's like, okay, baby goats are so darn cute. They're just adorable. But what I really need to be doing is I need to be doing more pranayama. I need to be sitting for meditation. I need to be contemplating. This experience that I had obviously has left some residual stuff in my body. I know how to get it out, but I need to do it. And watching baby goats isn't doing it. No matter how cute or adorable they are, it's not going to get it out of me. But our mind finds so many ways to make, this is right, the sense is it finds so many ways to make what I'm doing okay. It's okay if I watch YouTube right now. I'm watching videos of whatever it is your choice that you watch videos of. I'm watching music videos, or I'm watching yoga videos. You need to be doing a practice. Yogananda said, for 1 hour of reading, you need to sit and do meditation for 3 hours. So if I keep putting this information in myself, but I can't digest it, then it becomes a big problem. I have to be able to assimilate it, or I'm just going to have a bunch of stuff in there. And at the time of death, it's going to become so confused, right? And then when I leave the body, it's just going to be my unconscious mind and my soul attached, right? Just stuck together until I get another body to come back in. But then when I come back in, I'm going to be stuck out in the astral plane with my soul and my unconscious mind. And then I'm going to get another body, but I'm going to keep doing the same thing over and over again because I've not enacted free will. I've not gone against the grain of my samskaras. So you need to really examine what are your samskaras. And it can feel daunting sometimes, looking at my samskaras and examining my behaviors. And sometimes you just want to take a break. And sometimes I'm like, okay, you got 5 minutes break from this without, because we want to go, right? One of our deepest samskaras is we want to go into the negative. And that negative means I want to berate, I want to belittle myself for doing that. No, I don't need to berate or belittle myself. I need to acknowledge that and say, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to do better at this. I will do better at this. I can do better at this, and I must do better at this. Because someday I will succeed. Someday you will succeed. That's the way this game is. It's not a happy ending, right? It's not the ending if it's not a happy ending. So at some point in some lifetime, it will be a happy ending, and we will be acting skillfully, and we will be acting through free will. We will be expansive. We will be acting through. We will be doing, everything will be righteous. We will not be attached to the fruits of our labor. We will be selfless. And self-preservation. This is not just that moment of death, right? When we die, but we are always ego self-preserving constantly, all the time. How do I preserve myself? How do I make myself look better in this situation? I mean, how many times have we thrown someone under the bus to make ourselves look good? You know, somebody comes in and they're like, and if you haven't done it, you're not being honest here. You know, we've all had that situation where somebody comes in, whether it be at work or whatever, and they blame someone else for something, and you did it. And you're like, whew, escaped that one. And then afterwards, it's just kind of gnawing at you because you're like, oh man, I just totally just threw him under the bus. Do we go back and correct it? Or do we just think, we're like, whew, that was a close one. Got my job for another day. In the meantime, this poor chap is like getting reamed out. You know, or a parent is yelling at one of your siblings for doing something. You know, I probably could have gotten away with a lot with my siblings because I was the youngest and I was the most well-behaved. So there could have been many times I could have thrown my siblings under the bus. And I'm sure I did once or twice. I do remember my sister one time, she had me all tied up because she's significantly older. And she said, now where are you going now? And I said, every which way but loose. So I must have done something. She had me all, good thing I was flexible. But we do that, right? We're constantly trying to protect our ego. We are constantly, that is the way, all the time, whether we lie, whether we cheat, whether we steal, whether we just position ourselves so that we're in a better position than someone else. That's all self-preservation, all of it. One of those 4 primitive fountains is going to lead to all this other stuff, the way that we act. It's going to lead to those desires. How I interact with the world, what I want in the world, how I position myself in the world. So it goes back to constantly examining, why did I say that? Why did I do that? What was I hoping to gain out of this situation? You know, and start with start just examining how you eat. Are you willing to eat on the fly, right? Without saying, somebody said, if you can't even say a prayer before a meal, you're no better than a barbarian. That's a big thing to sit and think about. Can you just stuff something in the pie hole and not even think twice about it? That's not expansion. That's not free will. Right? We think free will is these choices between things in the world. I get to choose whether I'm going on this holiday to Europe or this holiday to India, right? We think that's free will. That's not free will. Free will, if you start thinking of free will as expansion, as being selfless, and we can't get to thinking about that without understanding where we're coming from. Which means we have to constantly be vigilant of what it is we're doing. We have to get rid of some of that garbage in the mind so that we can see ourselves clearly, because otherwise the ego sees, well, yeah, that was the perfect thing to do. I acted totally appropriate there. I 100% did that. Exactly right. Right? Self-preservation is also gathering, we'd like to gather our troops to support us, right? Those gossiping moments. We'd like to make someone else the bad guy because that makes me the really good guy. I like to be the victim because then someone else did something wrong to me. You hurt my ego. I mean, if we start saying that, doesn't it just sound silly? Instead of saying, you hurt me, you hurt my ego. I mean, that kind of just diffuses everything. If we start examining, well, why was my ego hurt? You know, if I say to Riley, you hurt my ego, and then he says, well, how did I hurt your ego? You know, then that opens up a very different conversation than if I say, you were mean to me. Why did you do that? It's very different. It's accusatory of saying, because then it gives me the opportunity, but gives me that safe space, right? And this is part of having a Sangha. This is part of having this group that you can say, hey, that hurt my ego. Well, let's examine. Why did it hurt your ego? Maybe it was that I intended to hurt you, right? Then I have to look at myself. Or maybe it was that in this situation, it opens up this whole door. You're opening up this whole room of conversation between you and this person. But you have to have that conversation with yourself too. Why did that hurt my ego so much? Why was my ego bruised there? Right? Riley and I were talking about, I do not like this phrase, butt hurt. No, your ego got hurt. Butt hurt is that, I don't even know if they're still saying it. Is that something people still say? Butt hurt? It was a few years ago for sure, because I remember talking about it like, I don't know, 21, 22, something like that. People would talk about, it's the younger generation. I've had a few of them come to me and say, well, I was just butt hurt. I'm like, no, you were ego hurt. There has nothing, your butt didn't get hurt at all. Your ego got bruised. That's what happened. You've heard it, right, Kyle?
Yeah.
Butt hurt, okay. It's just, yeah, we get our ego gets really bruised. And then we don't want to look at why the ego was bruised, because then we have to examine our samskaras. Then we have to examine our habits and our behaviors. Then that's not being selfless. That's not being expansive, right? That's not freeing ourselves from the samskaras. So we just keep going down this rabbit hole all the time. So we need to rethink what ego is. We need to rethink what free will is. And we need to examine ourselves. Am I acting based on free will here? Is this action, or is this just a samskara rearing its head? Then all of this, right, when we start practicing and we start examining these four primitive fountains, it leads to viveka and vairagya, that discrimination and dispassion, which then, so now we've got this road of desire and we've got the senses and we're traveling down this road of desire and we see the shiny new nickel over here and we see the bright lights over here and we see a holiday over here. We have that discernment, that discrimination that, is that going to make my life really any better? Is this something that I'm just doing because I'm distracting myself? Is this holiday just another goat video? Right? Is this, so we start examining that, and then we have that discernment of, this isn't good for me. This isn't helpful. This is just another rabbit hole. And that vairagya, that dispassion, where we realize all of these things of the world only lead to momentary happiness. Just these little glimpses of pleasure. But they're not lasting. Because if it was lasting, we wouldn't have to go and get more of it. We went on this perfect trip, but now we have to plan another trip that we want to be just as perfect as that trip. We live in this really spectacular house, but suddenly we see on Facebook that someone else has a better house. And now my house isn't so nice anymore. I want that house. I want to live in that neighborhood. I have a perfectly great car, but then I see someone else has a better car than me, or they got a newer car. No, I want a newer car because I'm not happy anymore. Even though my car is perfectly fine, it's great to travel with the boys, but now I want something different. Because I don't have that viveka, I don't have that vairagya, because I haven't looked at my 4 primitive fountains, because I haven't examined my free will, because I haven't examined my ego. Right? There's a beautiful story, Riley and I were just talking about it this morning, about Buddha. So when he was a prince and they took him out, and his father had said no, he never wanted him to leave the kingdom because he didn't want him to see any of the suffering that was happening in the world. So as he made one of his chariot drivers take him out, and he was looking in the city, and he saw all of the suffering. And then he came back to the kingdom, and he went to sleep that night, and he saw this old man who was just all this problems from just being old, having problems standing, having problems walking, having problems doing everything that we just take for granted because we're able-bodied at this point. And he heard this voice say, "You too will grow old." And then the next night he had a dream, and there was this old man who was very ill and just having an awful time with the pain. And he said, "You too will get sick," this voice. And then the third night he had another dream, and in this dream, the man was dead. And he heard the voice say, "You too will die." And he thought to himself, all these things that you can have in the world, all these momentary pleasures, right? I'm still going to get old. I'm still going to get sick, and I'm still going to die. I want that lasting peace that never changes. That peace, the Atman. I want to access the Atman. I want to access my inner dweller. I want to know who I am, so that no matter what happens, whether I'm sick, I'm still at peace. Whether I'm old, I'm still at peace. Whether I'm taking my last breath, I'm still at peace. That's what we want. That's the difference between Shreya and Preya, right? You have Shreya. Preya are those things that lead to those momentary pleasures in life. So it's that Preya of, I had this really great dinner, but now I'm thinking about what am I going to have tomorrow for dinner? Or I went to this really great show, and now I want to go to another great show. Right? That we're constantly seeking. I had this person who just showed me so much affection and attention, but now I need to get someone else to show me affection and attention. We're constantly seeking those pleasures outside of ourselves. Whereas Shreya, right, we're doing our practice, we're seeking that peace, that peace that surpasses all understanding. I don't need to understand why this is happening. Karmically, I don't understand, but I have the peace to endure it. Because I know that this is what is supposed to happen. I am content with what is happening because it is supposed to happen. This goes back to those prabda, the arrows that have been shot. We have nothing, we can't change the trajectory of those arrows. But what I can change is my reaction to it. And if I want to change where the arrows that are going to come out and go wherever they're going to be shot in the future, 2 ways to do that: doing your practice and through selfless service. And you will only be able to do selfless service by doing your practice, because then you will have this understanding of yourself. And then everything in your life becomes a meditation. Everything in your life becomes an act of service. Because you're fully present, because you're not doing it for any type of gain, any type of profit. Okay, I think that's enough.